The walking dead have always been a blight upon our existence, a plague that seeks to end us, but most of the ones I have talked about thus far haven't really sought the end of the world of the living. While they certainly haven't made things more helpful for them, nor have they gone out of their way to stop themselves from trying to destroy stuff. In fact, some of them are leading to that. But their goal is not to end the world of man. This is not so for today's undead. For now, it is time to discuss the Wight, sometimes known as a barrow wight, an undead being that actively despises the living and wishes to bring the world into a state of undeath. Now, wights maintain a semblance of their former life. They would still respond to their name that they had before, but don't make the mistake of thinking it's still them. They have been corrupted and twisted into a new being in the shell of a former life. They are fueled by pure hatred and anger, driven by violence against the world, seeking to end this one. But do not feel too bad for them, since most people who become a wight in some way choose this life. They absolutely have no idea what they might be signing up for though. See, wights are one of the first forms of undeath I have talked about that have several steps in their creation. They are not as confusing as some other forms of undeath that I shall talk about one day, but this is where it starts to become, shall I say, mucky. For a start, the person must be a bad person before they die. As I discussed when talking about the ghouls, a lot of undead are powered by a force known as negative energy, or natural necrotic energy. We all have a little bit of this force within us. We have all done an evil act at some point in our life. We've picked a pocket, told a lie that actually got someone hurt, or punched a relative in the face because they said something horrible about your date that you brought to the family dinner and you just couldn't let it stand. Sorry. Point is, we all have this energy in us in some form. Unless you're a particularly nasty person though, it's only a minor inconvenience, or not even a slight aspect. Now, you have to be a particularly evil person for this to be relevant. Not quite the horrible perversions you must do to become a ghoul, say on par to being desperate and murdering someone for just what's within their pockets. Evil acts to be sure, and that would be, shall I say, step 1 in what creates a wight. Step 2 involves sort of how they die, and this part's not particularly clear. Some say that you have to die in accordance with justice. Think a paladin smiting them down for murder and such. Others think it's that they die in accordance to the fate and the wills of the gods. I'm not going to begin with the argument on fate, I'm just going to throw that out as a possibility. But, however their, shall I say, rightful killing occurs, the important part is that they must be buried. That's the bit that truly matters. And lastly, or step 3, after the body is buried, the soul must be unwilling to let go. After no one could doubt that they are dead, the soul must be saying, "No, I have so much more work to do," when in reality that work is probably foul and dark. After this, they might hear a call. See, the final part is widely believed, even by myself, but there's technically no proof for it. Regardless, what most believe is that some evil god, or demon, or devil lord must hear this call to live on, and use the negative energy from within their body and bring them back. Once this is all done, a new wight is created. This also explains why some wights rise quickly, almost instantly, and some could take years to fully rise, since dead bodies slowly build up negative energy over time. So though all the requirements are met, some might take years for there to actually be enough energy within them. But with that being said, all of this can be halted if a sacred rite is performed or a cleansed graveyard is where they are actually buried. This is actually why unattended graveyards are such a dangerous thing, and why almost all of them are found near active temples. Regardless, this is how wights are supposedly created, and with all of that in mind, you can see why I don't in any way pity them. Not to mention that the only thing they want now is to kill and end the world of the living. But they have a hilarious restriction that sort of holds them back from doing this, and that is that they are simply far too territorial. Now, this is not an actual physical limit. There's no force that's stopping them from just leaving and trying to kill everything outside of their tomb. This is just a rare sight. Most stay within their undead lands or crypts or wherever they're buried, like an old man complaining that those kids run their garden again. Well, except they'll actually go out of their way and kill them after complaining, so perhaps it's not the best an allegory. Then again, I have seen some incredibly awful old men. But back on topic, or rather as a little aside, I'd like to note that their burial does not need to be a structure or a crypt of any sort. Any burial would do, provided they are intentionally put there and the body is intact. So no cremations, for example, but just dumping them on a battlefield wouldn't work. I remember one time I was attacked by an entire group of wights deep within a swamp, and I was so confused about how they were actively up and fighting as wights that I fought terribly and had to be saved by a bard who was travelling with me at the time. But after the battle, I was a little bit obsessed with trying to deduce how they became wights, and I came up with this working theory. Since they were dressed like scoundrels and rogues, and I suspect they died quite recently, they must have been part of a gang of some sort that was double-crossed, due to the amount of stab wounds that were in their back. Now, their killer tried to hide their bodies within the swamp, and they did such a good job of doing so that it must have truly counted as a burial. This implies that the burial rules are quite loose, and that wights can truly be found anywhere, provided the body is sufficiently buried. But I would be amiss if I did not touch on the topic of their intellect, as they are the first form of undead I have discussed that truly are on par to your average humanoid as soon as they are created. They even use their minions in tactical formations and would give them commands, say, on par to a malicious operations. Which brings me perfectly to my next topic, that of their powers and the minions they can create. See, wights are quite a bit more formidable than your average undead. They're at a stage where it truly is work best left to the likes of adventurers. For example, a local priest might be able to make the undead turn and fear when stopping, say, a ghoul or a zombie, but with wights, well, they're one of the weaker forms of undead that can actually resist this. It's not a guarantee, and I'm sure the priest will still try, but they are reliably able to resist it and sometimes kill them. It's why adventurers are often sought out when wights are nearby. Holy magic does no more damage to them than it does anything else, and despite what people think, the sun does not hurt them in any way. They just hate it utterly, which I find a little funny. But normal blades will do a lot less damage unless it is made of or coated in silver in some way. No one truly knows why this is, and the theories are endless. Just have some silver on hand, as any good monster hunter will tell you. But the thing that truly makes them scary, other than their general combat prowess, which is surprisingly good, it's on par to say some knights, is their ability to drain the very life force from you. This power saps at a part of your soul, and maybe even converts it into negative energy, making it almost impossible to heal without the appropriate time and rest. But if this power deals the final blow, the target dies instantly, before they've even hit the ground, but they won't stay there for long, since anyone they kill with this power will rise again as a zombie under their command. Now, this effect takes almost an entire day and can be prevented by, say, resurrecting the person or destroying the body, which is why most armies burn the dead after dealing with wights, since there's no massive indicators sometimes when this power kills someone. But if the process is allowed to finish, they will become a new zombie. How many times they can do this depends on how powerful the wight is. A safe average would be, say, around a dozen, about 12 of them, but an ancient and powerful one can make way more. This also affects how long the drain can take to heal, should you best them, for example. While most can be healed in, say, a single night's rest, perhaps a week at most, some could take years to fully recover and leave a ghastly mark upon the body, which often takes the form of the hand used to actually grab them for the drain. Typically, anyway. I remember one rogue who went up against a particularly nasty wight that drained them almost dry before they were aided by their party. Because the wight grabbed them at the top of their head, their forehead looked completely burnt and their hair turned white in a handprint fashion. It took a few years for them to fully heal, and even then there's still a white patch in their hair, though the pattern is a lot less clear, and I've got to say it kind of suits him now. The story I have of a wight is actually how I ended up with my sword that I use. It's nothing special. In fact, if I was partial to using the blade, I probably would have replaced it years ago. But since it was the first magical item I truly earned while adventuring, it has some sentimental value to me. See, long ago there was a dwarven lord and warrior by the name of Van Dalstruck, not his native tongue name I should note, an unusually nasty one by dwarven standards. In his early days he was given a holy blade by an Aasimar, a half-celestial. The blade was called Grimthir, and he went on to do many powerful acts with it. It is said he slayed 1,000 orcs all on his own and killed an adult red dragon. And I can actually vouch that the adult red dragon thing is most likely true, for he took the horde for his own and denied it to his people. This is where his greed became so much of a problem that it led to him becoming a tyrant, and by the orders of the Dwarven King he was to be executed and brought to his ancestral tomb to be buried. Perhaps as a punishment they intentionally forgot the appropriate funerary rites, or maybe the dwarves made one of their few mistakes when it comes to their traditions, something I find highly unlikely. Regardless, his form was allowed to become a wight, and he quickly turned his family's tomb into a foul and twisted lair. He picked up his once holy blade and turned it on the king that he views as wronging him. But I didn't actually kill this dwarven wight. He was killed by an adventurer long ago, since this was a few 100 years before I was even born. But that hero called the sword Thorn, as he didn't know the true story behind it. He ended up being eaten by a dragon who knew the sword as that name. That dragon was then attacked by a horde of orcs, and their orcs leader took the sword and called it Skull Eater, or something akin to that moniker. That orc was then ambushed by hobgoblins and went on the run. When he was on the run, he was killed by another wight on the road. And over a few 100 years after I was born, that wight is the one I killed, the one my party vanquished, and where I got the sword. And since no one else in the party wanted the blade, as they had a superstition around the undead, I took it, and I still hold it to this day. The blade has lost most of its magical power over the years, and from what I gather, its story was greatly exaggerated in how powerful the blade truly was to begin with, but I adore it. This blade means so much to me, and its story took me, if I'm being honest, far too long to learn, and way too much of my time than I'd like to admit, but it is still near and dear to me. Thank you for listening to my tales. I am the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe, it would really mean a lot to me. But, till next we meet, fellow traveller, have a good day.